Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's club session. This is number 27, I think, and we're going to be doing a bit of an experiment. Rather than creating loads of slides and running through them, boring you with the detail, I'm going to try something a little bit new. So I've invited on two guests, Claire and Jack, who will introduce themselves in a minute. And we're going to be having what I call a social media roundtable. But basically we've got loads of questions on social media, lots of things to talk through. There are tons of different channels and different ways that people can communicate with each other. And we just want to look at how social media has changed, particularly in the lockdown, what the current state of it is, and just talk about the ways we use social media, any tips of advice and for businesses. So first, Jack, say hello, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack. I'm from McCaughtrie, and we predominantly help people to use social media more effectively. So helping them with their strategies and also then sort of planning and publishing their content.
And we work together on with a few clients actually, but namely Whitley Jones. So we do you sort of handle all of the PR, all of their communication. You even go so far as to manage their LinkedIn and other social profiles. So you do a lot of that management for them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's certainly nice to work with someone like you who really understands some of those networks, because there are so many of them, and you can't. It's difficult even for one person to understand them all. And Claire, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Claire. I work with Ben part of the week, supporting him with his customers and various different parts of marketing, and then the rest of the week I work for a sole company and I manage all of their marketing efforts. So yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, really.
So you've come on as not necessarily an expert in social media, but you do use it and have a sort of a business point of view in terms of how you've used it. So you obviously work with us on social media. You put out a lot of the podcast posts and manage that side of the communication. And you do it with this other company, which is quite a different audience, really. So it'd be interesting to get that dynamic as well.
Definitely. Hoping to learn some stuff.
Yeah, hopefully. Me too. It's always good. And I'm Ben. I do lots of things like Claire, marketing, strategy, web development, video, data analysis. I mean, that, if you work with me, you probably know that I'm quite interested in all those different areas. Remember, as you're part of the club, we've got loads of previous webinars. As I said, this is the 27th. So we've got 26 other webinars on various different topics. If you don't know where to start, I would check out the marketing strategy series. There's, I think it's Foundation, Pro, and Expert. So there's 3-hour-long ones where I go through things you can do in marketing if you're at all stuck. It's a really useful place to start. And we've got a podcast version of this as well. So you can listen to it while you're walking the dog, doing the dishes, chores, whatever. It's certainly the way I listen to it. If you want to contact me, if you've got any questions at all, or you want me to look into something specifically in one of these sessions, email me, support@ratherinventive.com. Okay, let's get started. So what I wanted to look at first is social media, since the days of Facebook and IRC, I think before that, we've always wanted to communicate as humans, and there's various different iterations of that and various different companies trying to be at the forefront of social media and stealing our attention and therefore advertising money. And Facebook's been dominant for quite some time. I remember it growing really in its dominance, certainly way overtaking Twitter. Then we had Instagram rising up, probably because through the even though it's a different platform, but that rose up as well. Twitter, sort of, we've seen that downfall. But there are actually loads of different social channels out there, or different ways of communicating with friends, family, customers, your audience, whoever it might be. And what I want to do is look at where we are now, really, with social media, just broadly, just how is it working? How do we use it? Has it changed specifically during the lockdown? I mean, Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
In terms of how people use it, or certainly how businesses are using it, in terms of change, I think that a bit like everything over the last 12 months has been a bit of a mixed bag, especially when the clients that we work with, but also then just the people that we talk to or know of. I think one key theme that has come from it is that people have, certainly from a business point of view, it's been allowed them to take some time to look at it, how they've used it and use it differently, because either it was just something that they did and there was no real rhyme or reason behind it, or there was some strategy and a plan behind their efforts, but they hadn't reviewed them for a while, so they've taken this time to do it. And I think that's either because they've had the time created, or most importantly, these platforms, whichever ones they use, have possibly come a little bit more front and center because they haven't been able to see their customers, because let's say they have a shop or whatever it might be, or they actually go out to see clients and customers on a regular basis, or events haven't happened. It's actually been quite refreshing that the use has changed more to a communication tool as opposed to the perception of this out and out sort of sales tool, which is something that we've always tried to encourage. I know, Ben, when you talk to people, all of marketing is about communication, and sales come after. When we talk about social media, we echo that, but sometimes it's really quite hard to change. So I've seen that people have maybe naturally, because they've had to, or they've looked at it differently, the way the use has changed and the messaging has shifted and changed. That could also have been sort of married up with people have had more free time, as in us as customers, more free time because we can't go out and do things, that then they spent more time on social media, rightly or wrongly. And that's possibly changed some habits from both sides. So I think there's a few things that have come out of it. As we all know, if we think about it, you've probably seen the examples where still there's that wrong use of social because people can't go out and go about their day-to-day lives or business. They've seen the digital landscape and the social media landscape as this place to go and fill with some noise. Because they feel, well, we're not doing anything else, so let's go and do something over here, which then
because they've got no plan or no idea of what outcomes they want, or even how to communicate with their customers, they just push information out there.
It's wrong, and that obviously creates the wrong impression, and it's not that beneficial.
Do you think there's also a change in how the platforms are being used as well, from not just communication channels anymore, but broadening into sales channels as well? I know that we've just started developing a site for a shop in Watton-under-Edge. I keep getting it wrong. And she's got a lovely furniture shop, but actually no one's been able to come into the furniture shop to buy anything. So she's been selling items online, or people have seen them online, and then they sort of pay her digitally, but not through the social channels, but the social channels become her shop very much. Having to change. Have you seen changes there?
Exactly that. So we've recently, in last few weeks, we've been speaking to a brewery that their focus has always been on trade as opposed to retail. So their marketing has always been either to attract pubs, restaurants to essentially sell their beer or their bottles. But then their other area of communication is that brand awareness, and they just want to make the public and essentially the end customer know who they are, what they buy into. They can go and find them at a pub. Well, without sort of going over it, obviously that all stopped, and they then had to shift more to that end user and that target market. And because nobody could essentially come into the brewery to purchase from them themselves, and obviously they weren't then selling into the trade, all of a sudden they had to do this sort of home delivery and things like that, which the home delivery is just the business development, the business activity. But in terms of getting it out there, that had to be a sales tool, and that's how they got bookings and things like that. So that's just one example. I think a lot of people have had to shift that it has become a sales tool, which on the things that I'm hearing and seeing, that some elements will still remain the same, as much as everybody wants to get back to how they previously had sort of gone about their business. And I've also seen some, because of the scenario, people that you never ever would have thought that could, let's say, sell, or even their customers wouldn't naturally buy that product from social. It would just influence their purchasing decision. All of a sudden thinking, well, we need to go and buy it from there. And I think there's two sides of the coin there, that because we've had more time as individuals online, I think we may have stretched our boundaries and our ceiling and our purchasing habits. And I don't think that's restricted to social. I think that's just online, because we can't go into somewhere to either browse or to look and feel and then go and pick it up. We've got more confident to go and purchase things. So it's not just, your retail. So your let's say hair and beauty or clothes or whatever. I think there's other things that we've looked to purchase, or certainly become aware of these brands. So that demand has also then sort of that stimulated the need, but also then the fact that other areas of of business, whether that's a shop or whatever, have been closed, or you've been limited. So sort of some businesses have actually been caught in the middle, and and a lot have seen a benefit that, as I say, some things may continue, some they may sort of, their priorities might shift elsewhere.
Yeah, I
think only time will tell with that.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be interesting to see what happens this year. How about you, Claire, working with both me, or you do the social media really for our podcast, and also the companies that you're currently working for, and then the one prior. Have you seen any change in the use of social media? I mean, there's quite different audiences between the companies you've worked with.
Well, yes, they are all completely different, so it's quite hard to compare them. But I think for me, it's the things where companies have really been pushing to be more personal in what they're sharing, and really tailoring it to the customer. That's where it works for me. And funnily enough, I was doing your podcast this morning, which is going to be released on the 12th, which is how to engage your audience and about making remarkable content. So it's timed quite well. So I think from that, however experienced you are sort of watching that myself, it kind of makes you realize actually it's about making sure that you are being remarkable to your customer and making it relevant. And that's the big takeaway. And I think that's something, because of the lockdown, companies are starting to realize. But I think it's a very, because they've had the time to be able to do that, because they haven't had to market in other areas. I think it'll be really interesting to see whether people continue with that, or whether they kind of keep social media at the forefront, or whether they'll kind of revert back to the kind of easier, less effort marketing in some ways.
Yeah, just pushing stuff out there. Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. I've always had a love-hate relationship with social media. I love the idea of it, except I can't get past the general broadcasting and what feels to me that the people who win, you need to be online a lot and active a lot. You need to be available. I don't know how people do it, honestly, and then carry on their jobs. I mean, I remember an interview we had, I forget his name, was it Tom?
Tom Ross.
Tom Ross. And he was talking about developing a community and how he works 18-hour days, and he's answering or commenting on posts on Instagram while he's in the lift or going between places. And that works for him. He's able to be online, he's available, he can build that community by being responsive regularly. And I think that is valuable. I think being responsive, whether it's to an email, to a phone call, or social post, is incredibly important, so that people feel that you're taking care and attention over their need. But it's hard work, and I struggle to balance that time and effort, frankly, and it's not something where I can be on social media all the time. And whereas I see some people are, where I spend my time is something like this. This is my social channel, really. And it's just, this leads me into that social media. I've seen, or certainly heard about, people talking that social media is going to go from this sort of mass broadcast where one tweet goes out to everyone, to be more niche channels where you might have a private WhatsApp group where you invite certain people into. Clubhouse, which I want to talk about later, that's similar-ish to that, where you've got these more niche channels, private channels, that you have to focus and pay attention to, rather than just, I'm going to follow all these people and just get all of the messages, and people end up just firing stuff out there. I don't know if you felt that, Jack, that you've seen that social media, when it's going well, has been more niche and focused rather than just blasting out to everyone.
Yes, definitely. And I think this time has highlighted that a bit of what Claire was saying around it's not forced, it's made people really think about the personalization of their marketing. When that then filters that down through to social media, it's actually people to sit back and think about, where are your target markets? Who really are these people? Where are they? That then, how we've then, once they've had that conversation or internally, or they've thought about it, is then to think, well, where do we go and find these communities or these groups of people, Sometimes it's tended to be, let's say, on your big platform, your household names. But where I think it's something I've been trying to get people to think about, but I think just naturally the time has happened that people have thought about it, is that you go and use a particular platform in a way that is closely aligned with you as a business, not these predetermined ideas, as you say, broadcasting these messages to the masses. Okay, yes, your big brands, your influencers and things like that. Okay, that's they have the resource, or that's just the way that they run their business or their accounts. I've found that people really need to sit down and consider who they want to talk to and what are they giving, what information are they sharing with them, and also with that in mind, having the confidence to only use one particular platform for one target audience or one theme of content, which I think we've still got a long way to go, but I have seen the start of that sort of that shift change. And I think that is even changed in some ways during the 12 months, not just the 12 months there, because if you just remove digital, I think all that massive shift, let's say around this time last year, and it was all sort of panic stations, loads of uncertainty. So it was right, either don't do anything and we'll adjust, or let's do lots and then let's see what happens. I think as we've worked through and where we are now, that hopefully will continue, that there is this, social media is fast paced, but you need to be in control. So a slower pace of ideas and really having this time to really think something through, and the communities that you either need to talk to or you want to create is something I think that should remain, and it has been something I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. Claire, do you? I'll throw this question at you. You may not have an answer to it, but the other problem I have is I have a lot of problems with social media. In fact, communication. I love communication between people is great, but social media can get in the way of that. Certainly, Facebook had lots of controversy surrounding it. I know recently Australia has either enacted or is going to enact something where if Facebook wants to have links on its platform, then it needs to pay for those links. And that's just if you and I are on Facebook and we're in Australia and we post a link to a news article we've just seen, and there's a big list of news, they're specifically news articles rather than any link, then Facebook needs to pay for that. And it's because the big news publications are believing that Facebook is stealing their traffic, and to some extent they are. But it's very interesting that the Facebook has taken the concept of the web, these links, and because they've abused their particular position, Australian government is looking to tax Facebook for links that get posted. And actually they said, no, we're not into doing that. I haven't followed up the story to find out if they are doing that now. And so let's get to my question is like, are social media channels, do you think, sort of ruining the way we communicate with each other, because they are trying to game the system so they can get as much maximum attention as possible in order to sell advertising and keep people on their platforms? Do you think that can last? Do you think that works?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that. There's a documentary on Netflix about social media and the platforms and how they are sort of ruining how people communicate, and how not individual platforms, but devices are just trying to connect you all the time. So these developers who have developed these platforms, with the aspirations that they're going to be really positive and connect people, out of it kind of grows into this sort of monster, which they then can't control. And it's just evolving and changing and manipulating how people communicate and are constantly connected to their phone, because the algorithms are getting smarter and cleverer and just sort of escalating the sort of the positive little idea that they had at the beginning, but it's just sort of been stretched. So yeah, it was going back to your question. I think the thing with social media, it really depends in how people want to use it, and what their sort of aspiration is in how it's going to be good for them or their business. So as the receiver or consumer of that information, I think you've just got to be really careful in how you respond and engage, because the algorithms will start kind of manipulating your view of that content.
Yeah, I think we've got a responsibility as marketers not to put out a load of crap, not to perpetuate this problem, but also to educate people on how to use social media and use it correctly ourselves. Not get drawn into it, because as much as it might seem great that you've got your customers hanging on your every word and following you, it's not good for them ultimately. Nancy's just dropped a question in the chat, sharing my view. Thanks, Nancy, of course. And she says, in fact, in my new business, some audiences and customers are saying that they are overwhelmed by social media. Definitely. I mean, I feel that. It may be an age thing to do for me, certainly. But they appreciate a direct, more personal approach. Following months will be very interesting. It will actually, as we release lockdown and we're able to see each other in person, go to the pub and meet up. It will be interesting to see how social media has changed and whether people want to break away from that. Anyway, I didn't want to sort of dive too much into the darker side of it, but it is interesting looking at the balance and it's interesting to think about the information we put out from our businesses and how that is used by social media companies. Shall we dive into, I've got a list of all social media accounts by activity, which I got from the Buffer blog. This data is from 2019. So things have probably grown. Companies will have shifted in the scale a little bit, but it's got all of them in there. In fact, it may have some that people don't recognize, but we'll just go through them and talk about them individually and see where we're up to. So number one, Facebook with 2.23 billion monthly active users. That's what MAU stands for. Wow, that's quite a few, isn't it? I mean, Facebook, I don't know when I can't remember when it started. Was it 2005? Something like that? Maybe earlier than that?
It may be earlier than that, only because of only perhaps a couple of family and friend quizzes that I've been on in recent months. Not me. People may have thought that the question would have come from me in terms of it's my area, but I remember that there's some of the social platforms in their infancy are a lot older than we actually think they are. Some pre-millennium, but obviously have only actually become not even mainstream, but even become globally known, not to the extent they are now, only in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and Facebook as a platform now, it really is trying to keep everyone within Facebook. I mean, some people consider Facebook as the internet. That's where they find everything. Much as if you like buying on eBay, then you'll always go to eBay first or Amazon first, because they're trying to satisfy everything. I mean, one thing that does come up really high up on what people like about Facebook, well, there's two things. The reach on ads, the fact that if you are boosting a post, the ads can really get to get the right people. In fact, we're doing up our house and we've had tradespeople coming. And someone said that they put an ad on Facebook and they're just getting tons of phone calls. It's truly the success story of Facebook advertising. They pay, 20, 50 quid, 25, 50 quid, something like that, for this ad to go out to people who are local, who need that particular service. He gets phone calls. Very tangible. He's getting a good return on investment there. So that's one thing I've heard that's really works well on Facebook is the targeted advertising. There's a darker side to that. We're not really going to go into it, but how they get that so targeted is by many nefarious means. They also have a good groups network. So they've got a good message board forum system built into it. And of course, Messenger as well. I don't use Messenger at all, but I hear a lot of people find the groups is a very... people can build up lots of big groups that have a lot of engagement. So they're two areas that I've heard a lot that Facebook has worked really well. What do you think, Jack, on Facebook? What are your sort of key best things about it?
I agree with both of those. But I think the advertising is really good as long as, going back to, we talk about what's changed, but this has always been in terms of lockdown, what's really important is as long as you really know who your target audience are, where there's been a difficulty where those businesses that predominantly their business pre-lockdown was in person, it was a shop, a pub, or it was reliant upon customers coming to see them because they were placed on the high street or wherever it was. People knew about them from their presence, their physical presence, as opposed to their online presence. Then when you ask them about target market, as in existing target market, prospective target market, people think that they know about it because they hadn't looked at social. It's quite hard. Advertising can be key, so very low cost, as long as you know, especially for local audience, that works really effectively, very in line with your example. But also then trying to marry up maybe some data and insight that you've got from outside of social media, outside of Facebook, from your Google Analytics or the orders that you've had or the conversation you're having offline. When you bring that back into Facebook for a very, let's say, a short ad, maybe a week, 2 weeks, and a small budget, that can be really quite successful. And it's something I would encourage people to look at. Not all of the time. It's not like an advert that you would run continuously, but I think that's worthwhile. The communities bit, which I think is really interesting, especially based on what we've just previously spoke about, as in controlling how information is served to end users. That the whole point is that they are controlling that message that's seen in front of them, and they're doing that by prioritizing the communities or the groups that you're involved with. But then they're not, obviously they can't control the content that's going in there, because it's a local messaging board, or it could be I was talking to someone and they're heavily involved in equestrian, so they're in equestrian groups and they get lots of information from it. Facebook can't control that, but what they are doing is the fact that they're pushing that to the top of our feeds and prioritizing it, but then the ads are sitting in between two consistent posts. So it's really, it's sort of, the communities are good because I think a lot of people get a lot from it, both as individuals, and it's a great source of information. But then there are limitations from a business point, because a lot of these communities, the people are going there for one common reason, but also they feel that it's this safe space that they're not going to be bombarded by business posts. So I'm having a lot of conversation with business owners going, well, how do I know there's this pool of people here? I've been trying so hard to find them, to bring them to my own page. How do I do this? I'm thinking, well, it's down to restrictions, which I think is good, because they do need to be these safe spaces for these communities. And I think that's what's going to happen, where we're going to touch on how different communities use different platforms, but it's then quite interesting to look at the biggest platform according to these figures, and these figures will be, I don't think they're going to change too much in terms of where Facebook sits, that the biggest platform out there is actually where there are these safe little corners of that platform with common interest. But I think that's where it will go. One thing's interesting for me is the fact that these top 4 or top 6, I think number 5, I don't know where number 5 is.
Oh yeah, sorry. There were more. I only picked out.
So
there are lots which people use, but I thought they were more direct communication.
Yes.
So I removed them. They're not business channels.
So certainly, let's say 1 to 4, and certainly in number 6, they are essentially all, let's say, in the same stable.
Yes.
Or same stables.
Isn't that?
So
well, apart from number 2, but yes, all of them are, definitely Facebook properties.
Yes.
Because Messenger that's Facebook Messenger. That's used by a lot of people. I mean, that's much more direct message, but people use it for businesses. I know businesses can put Messenger on their website. Business can use WhatsApp for that as well, and Instagram. That you can see why Facebook bought them up and certainly uses that. Let's move on to YouTube. Claire, I'll get your thoughts on YouTube. As you upload a lot of content onto YouTube for me and many other clients. A lot of people wouldn't think of YouTube as a social platform, but it is it's slightly different. And I think about more as a broadcast. So the posts that people make are videos. So they post a video and that communicates with their audience. And then the feedback is all comments. So comments come back. But sometimes people will comment in a video. So they might make a comment on a video by making their own video on their own channel and posting a link to it in the comments. So you've got this, which is what used to happen with blog posts, actually. People would write a blog, people on Twitter would then comment on that. But also then someone might write a blog post as a response to the blog post they just saw. So you've got this sort of very distributed communication going on. That aside, I mean, we use YouTube a lot for our podcasts. I don't really get into comments on them, and we don't have a huge amount of comments on them, but a lot of people do find it useful. How do you feel of YouTube as a social network, and what's its utility in terms of communicating with customers?
Well, I'm a big advocate for video, so I feel that YouTube dovetails quite nicely into different platforms. It's an easy way of sharing your content, and YouTube is owned by Google, so if you can have video content, you're sort of naturally gravitating traffic towards your site, and it really sort of helps with your SEO and things like that. I that's pretty much what I have to say on it, really, Ben. It's a great way of sharing your video content quite easily. On some of these platforms, it's so restrictive in how you can get video up there. Like, for example, I personally struggle with Instagram a lot. I'm constantly trying to squeeze multiple images up, and it's not all on my phone because I'm doing it for a business and it's not a personal account. I'm just constantly fighting with it or going against how they want me to use it to present the content in the way I want to. So YouTube works quite well in lots of ways for that.
Yeah, I like YouTube because for me it works. I like content that we can produce and put out there for people to consume when they are ready to consume it. I find, as I said at the start, this being present and available to communicate constantly is hard work, and I think that's where, you know, if YouTubers who are successful, they will be posting videos regularly, daily, multiple times a day, and they sit on the comments afterwards. So they'll post and they'll sit on the comments, responding and liking and sort of supporting their community that way. I think that's the ideal way to use YouTube as a social media platform. It's not how we use it. I'm much more an advocate, well, I guess coming from an SEO background, creating stuff and putting it out there, putting little seeds for people to find when they're ready, and then they can sort of dribble in as and when, rather than this sort of always on communication side of things.
With that, Ben, do you think things will change in terms of, there's like this, we talk about these platforms are trying to keep you in this platform. So you could run an example that you share the same post on Facebook, and one is a link to YouTube and one is you post that video natively. You're probably going to get a better reach if you've posted the video within Facebook.
Yes.
But do you think there could be a shift change between people? We always talk about the length of video. I mean, we've talked about it certainly with clients, but obviously depending on the topic of the video, whether that's a minute could suffice for something, but something else more in depth might need something a little bit longer. You obviously post podcasts and more in-depth content on YouTube. Do you think there will be there's a separation, but also there's a link between shorter, let's say, trailer type content that then leads, so it ticks the box for a social platform because there is some sort of video content uploaded directly, but then it signposts or there is a nod to that full length content if there is something a little bit more in depth that then sits on YouTube?
Oh, I see. So you might produce your, let's say an episode of a podcast or some video vlog that you have on YouTube, but then smaller, shorter content to go on other platforms. Yeah. Well, that's something we've experimented with. I mean, Claire, do you do that for us? I don't know if you still do the clips actually, but maybe you can explain what we do for the podcast and how we push that out.
The podcast, I generally sort of always share the intro. We make sort of GIFs or like little animations.
You say GIF, do you?
GIF.
It's GIF.
That's because my partner trains me the opposite way.
He's a nerd, so he understands that argument. Sorry, I interrupted you.
So yes, you've put me off now. Where was I? Totally.
Short clips and then
yes. So and I think little interludes of video clips where you just give a nugget of information, and just as you're about to give the gem, you cut off and you're kind of trying to.
You're good at doing that, yeah.
So it's that slight frustration where they have to link through to actually find out what you're talking about. I think they work quite well. It sort of breaks up the content of come over here and look here. You know,
yes,
there's so many
You've already given something.
And I think if it's visual and it's moving automatically as you're going through your feed, it just catches your eye and it draws you in that little bit more than maybe a still image or just text.
Yeah, and
sorry, Ben, go on.
No, I was going to say that's that idea of taking a short extract to entice, give something, but leave them hanging a little bit. So if they are interested, they can come. I mean, you can then get over the problem of not boring people, or whenever they see a video, they go, "Oh, I've got to watch this," until they get into it, obviously. And because just going back to long videos, I listen to podcasts, I watch videos. When you're into something, you're into it, and you can't get enough of it. You want more. but until you're into it, until you understand why it's good and why you like it, you want short, because you want to be able to get in. You want like a trailer for a film. It can get you excited. Either someone tells you it's really good, or you watch a trailer and go, yeah, I've got to watch that. But you wouldn't necessarily know, like flicking through on Netflix, you sort of not sure about whether you want to dive into them until you see that trailer that engages you. And I think it's the same with social media. It's that little trailer. So that's a good point. Sorry, Jack, I interrupted.
No, because the only reason I asked that is because that is something I've tried to introduce with a company that we're working with in London. They're an investment research company where they would have traditionally, talk about adapting, even if it's just from content, but they would have hosted events on a regular basis where there'd be a presentation, and that is the nature of how it's been done. But obviously that can't take place. But these events could be an hour long, an hour and a half long. The format of them still needs to be the same. It's just being delivered differently. Yeah. So they will record something, and yes, it will be live, but a bit like this, it is then ready for people to come and look at afterwards. And I'm guessing not everyone will watch it for the duration, but will watch it for a long period of time. Putting that type of content out there through social channels and that link through, it's hard enough then to move these people across. But if you're giving a snippet and it's just, I don't know, a few seconds of all of the people that are presenting or the key highlights, it's then that tease, but they've actually already got something from it, even if they don't move anywhere else.
Yes.
So it's still something valuable, something of interest. I was thinking, is that going to be something that people adopt? Because I still feel that video is still not on everybody's agenda, and even when it is at the start, there are these preconceptions that video is the old-fashioned corporate video that might be 5 minutes long, but there is as much need for the 30-second video as there is for the 30-minute video. Where that is placed and how it's distributed is obviously, especially with these list of social channels, they all vary very, very differently.
Yeah, and sorry, Claire, go ahead.
Definitely. So sort of slightly off, but with like Google Ads, for example, they're very keen on 15-second videos because 15 seconds is the optimum time to try and draw someone in and pull them in. So yes, they're really hard to make, those 15 seconds to sort of capture people and to get everything across. But if you can, then you're doing it right in a way. So yeah, over to you then.
I know, I was just going to say, sort of talking about where the little clips fit in, and it could be video clips, it could be short extracts of text, but I think social channels are good for having a conversation. So actually talking to people can be really useful for asking a question and getting a response. But doing that in real time is hard. I don't like it. I mean, you can do it maybe with 1 or 2 people, but to do it with lots of people chiming in, I don't know how people manage that. I know there are tools to help with that sort of thing. So it's much easier to then go to something like video where you can broadcast it out, and then almost actually like Demio here. So we're broadcasting out, and the people watching, like Nancy, can then ask a question, and we can feed that into what we're doing. It works quite nicely. But I've often found that a really nice way to get people to know content, to see your longer form content, whether that's a blog post or a video or what have you, is to have your channel of people who are interested in what you are outputting. And by channel, it could be your Facebook profile, your business page, your YouTube channel, a WhatsApp group, whatever it is. So you have a group where you foster just the right people who are interested in what you share, which could be links to other people's content. It could be a thought for the day. I don't know. It really depends on your cute picture of a bunny rabbit. I mean, it really depends on your audience, what they're interested in. You have that communication channel with them. And then when the time is right and when it's when you've got the content, you can then link them over to the content and share it maybe once, twice, 3 times in different ways to sort of bring them over and say, well, you're interested in these things. Here's what I'm working up to. And even better, actually, talking about it in advance if you can. So if you're building something big, talk about it out in the open and let people know. Maybe if you're contributing, you're working with other people, bring those people in for short interviews or get them to be part of the process. So you're building it up over time. I mean, that takes a lot of work. And if I were better at planning, then we'd do a lot more of that. It just takes time. But, you know, you see all the successful films that go out there or books, They don't just sort of plonk them out there and hope people buy. They go out and they get interviews from different places. And I think if you are the person who controls that channel, then you can do that with your own content. Well, we're really sailing on here, so let's sort of march through a couple of others. I mean, WhatsApp, that's interesting, it's there, but we'll leave it. I mean, I don't know what you think, Jack. I mean, WhatsApp to me is something that my family are all on, because some of them use Android devices and I'm on and some use Apple. So it's one platform we can all be on. So it's just a communication platform, text messages and photos. But for a lot of people, you can get business profiles as well and communicate out with lots of people at once. Any thoughts on that, Jack?
I use it, me personally, the same, friends, family, groups of people, as in social groups of friends, but also some certain groups, wider sort of social groups or things that are related to hobbies. To be honest, at the moment, I don't have much sort of knowledge or insight in terms of how people are using it as a business tool. But I have spoken to people that are using it with established people, so established customers, those groups, and I think people are going to gravitate more towards it if, as a theme, everybody's going down niche and community driven, because as we've just said, we're using it within our own personal communities. So I think it'll be good to broadcast messages that are very, very niche, based on what we just said. You've drip fed something, and there is this pool of ready-made people that have one common theme or one common agenda that you drop into. And I think, there could well be a shift towards that because of people being turned off elsewhere.
At my previous role, they got onto WhatsApp, and I sort of saw it, the pros and cons. So as an employee, I was added to the company group, and I think personally I was a bit like, I don't want to see you on my phone when I'm out of work. I don't want to know. Just shut down. But then they were also using it where the engineers were helping customers like fix their products or supporting them on how to use it, and that's really beneficial, because as a customer, I think if somebody's sending you that personalized sort of support and help when you need it most, rather than having to be on a computer and you're in a physical space and you're trying to do something, there is that sort of practicality to it. So pros and cons, I think, with WhatsApp.
Yeah, I like the idea of having your customers opt in to WhatsApp as a channel, so you can communicate with them. They can ask you questions. I mean, I do get customers just using WhatsApp because they've got my mobile number, and WhatsApp is the app they use for that. So to them, it's text messaging. But you could have it in a more chatty broadcast method. I think with business WhatsApp, it's one way. So I think the business broadcasts out, and then people answer back individually. So it might be interesting for people to have a look at that.
I think it will be totally dependent on what type of business you are. Which, I mean, this goes for everything, is I've had the people that have asked me about it, thinking you're not the type of business that would warrant using WhatsApp. It's sort of, I've got visions of people that, like clubs, for example, or I don't know, let's say it's like I'm using a hypothetical, like a personal trainer or a gym where there is a group of people that they see either multiple times a week, or they see someone at least once a month, and there's a new class or a new something or a piece of information that they want to just put into, and they're also trying to create that community for their own clients and their customers. I think that's going to be worthwhile for those, let's say, from broadcasting, as much as we're saying we're against that and that shouldn't happen.
But to a small audience, I think that works.
Small groups, I think it works really well.
So my kickboxing group, which I haven't gone for a little while, but certainly while we were doing it remotely, everything was on Facebook, and certainly was before. But as I didn't use Facebook that much, being remote, I had to go onto that. And actually, it was quite fun being part. They set up a group for members, already members, and then they would do the video Zoom calls where we all did kickboxing together, it worked well, actually, better than you might think. But what I really liked out of it is that they would share silly GIFs and animations and little clips of video they'd made, and on that channel, so to keep it going. And they weren't doing it to do marketing. They were doing it because they loved doing it. They love sharing, especially if you went to a class, they'd do a little video around and then they'd mix it up in iMovie and share it with everyone. And it's fun. So you want to be on that channel because you want to see it, and then you can comment on it and you can chat to people. And then when you get back to class, you can you can talk to each other about it. So actually, it was a really nice way of bringing the class that was once a week into something that spanned the week. So you're always part of their attention. And because of that, they would have people, a few people would come and go to the class because it wasn't their thing, but most people would then stay because they really enjoyed the community as well as the exercise. And I think, finding a channel, they did that on Facebook, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that on WhatsApp or one of these other more specific messaging platforms. Let's skip Messenger, maybe go to Instagram. How do you think that's kind of developed quite a lot actually since it started? What do you think, Jack, on Instagram?
I think, it has developed quite a lot. I think that's where there's been lots of shifts, but this shift in terms of who is using it from a business point. I think historically, and it still is, that there's this sort of preconception that businesses using it were those that were just solely visual. So anyone that's selling a product, obviously product photographs, or there tend to be a natural path where people thought it was. But in actual fact, I think it's increasing purely because the audience, the people that are using it, the shifting demographics. So you are seeing the likes of even people in, let's say, in B2B environments or people who provide a service. I think that's because, again, the ideas around content shifting. So it's more about the benefits of purchasing something from us as opposed to this is what you can buy from us. So I always use Xero as an example. Xero, the sort of the accounting tool or accounting and invoicing tool. That content, you'd have thought, well, why on earth would they be using Instagram, especially when they're trying to communicate with small business owners? But it's how their content is about, well, this is what you can do with the time that our tool will save you and that type of thing. I think it's shifting massively in terms of the reels and stories. That's more of this instantaneous, in actual fact, comes back to your point, Ben, of why you don't like social. There's this always on concept.
Yes. Yeah.
But in some ways, I think that's actually quite refreshing from how people use it, because we talk about, well, what to post. That's always a common question and always will be. And Claire talks about personalizing content. And that first baby step to personalizing content is sometimes sort of that behind the scenes type of information of sort of, this is what goes on, this is how something happens, not just the delivery of a service or the product that comes out the other end. And I think the stories allow that to happen and break down some of those barriers. It's
interesting you say about stories, and I find it very difficult to see the point for me. And I'm not saying there isn't one, but for me, when I produce something, I want to produce something that is of value now and into the future. I don't want to worry about. I don't want to have to create something and then it's just gone. And that to me is what stories are. I mean, I know there are ways of promoting them so they're not, but the whole idea is everything disappears. That you say something, you record something, and then it's gone. And to me, that feels, if it's not worth keeping, why say it in the first place? To me, anyway. Now, I think if you're having if you think of it like a conversation with your friends, let's say, actually, it does kind of make sense. So, Jack, if I was sending you a message, I can just talk about the day I was having and something I learned maybe from the day. Well, that's nice for you, and you can catch up on that. But it's actually might just, it's something and nothing. It's like it's not important enough to keep, but it was interesting to hear about something like that. So if you think about having a conversation with friends in that way, where you might be sharing these videos to and fro. I know iMessage on the iPhone, you've got audio messages, which you can do that with. It is a bit more disposable. And so I think if you think of it like a way of just communicating and it just disappears, then you don't need to worry too much about what's in it. And so it gets people over the barrier. For me, I want to consider it. I don't want to just fire stuff out there. But that may depend on your age. Maybe younger people are actually happier with that. And it might change as they get older. They'd actually prefer to, if they're going to take the effort, they want to make the effort and do it well and publish it. Don't know what your thoughts are on that. Claire, maybe have you got any ideas on that?
Oh, Ben, because I'm the same as you. Well, the thing with Instagram, I'm sort of quite new to it. Been sort of working with the company in the sort of last 5 months to try and grow it. And the thing that really struck me with it was actually how friendly people were and how willing they are to engage, and how you can start building up your following much quicker than you can on, say, Facebook or Twitter, for example. So for me, I was sort of quietly surprised at how responsive they are. But again, it's that I haven't done stories that disappear because I think I'm going to a lot of effort. I wanted to be there, and I want the company to see that I've been doing it rather than just floating off. So yeah, I don't know. Jack, could you sort of share about this?
Yeah, I think so. I think you are right in terms of this permanent and then this, let's say, permanent way of sharing content. That is a little bit more, it hangs around, or then there's this wastefulness. But it is, I think, in some ways, you could actually say, isn't that about what's going on in broader society, whether even if it's social content, and also then from a younger demographic, as in it's very instantaneous and I'm on to the next thing, I'm on to the next thing. So, but I will sort of log what I saw and remember the next time I see a story and associate that with you. But I think there is that way of, if you're adding stories, let's say to your highlights, there are ways of that sort of sticking around a little bit longer. I think there's a couple of points that, Claire, you mentioned how it's quite refreshing for you to see that you're getting a quick result, whatever that is, whether that's growth of following, engagement, and the nature of that engagement and comments. I think that comes back down to the how people are using it is to break down that barrier of the posts on a timeline or on a grid are very much, they're a bit more substantial. Whereas, and this is what you can find out about us, and this is our identity, and this is what we stand for, and ultimately this is what you can purchase from us. Whereas, and also you keep hearing these word of experience or experiential. The stories, some brands are using that as, this is the experience of if you worked within our company, this is what goes on in developing something. Or then you're just trying to live through, let's say you're following an individual, you're somehow peering into that person's life, that person's experience. So the question is that just a thing that's going on with changing habits and things within demographics? And I think it possibly is. And I mean, some brands are using it because there's this shift, as in when, let's say, a person is following their friends' accounts, exactly what you were saying, Ben, there is this shift of attention that when someone goes into an app, that habit is to watch those stories that then dripping in are those brands and those companies they follow, because then that follower that they have actually doesn't spend that much time actually on their timeline. So in some ways, it's really important. Instagram's great to build a following quickly through hashtags and delving into different conversations, which we talked about in terms of community and being niche. But then the stories sometimes are used as ways of just communicating and being in front of your existing audience, which sometimes could be quite hard for people to understand. Because thinking, hang on a minute, I've built this audience, and if I post on my timeline, I'm seen by them. But I think we all know that isn't true. In some ways, different things will work in different ways for different companies. But I think the stories are just to be seen by people that already know of you. But with that, to try and build that relationship, because it's that sneak peek type thing. But I think it's being driven by demographic and change.
It's interesting what you say about growing audience, because I mean, that is important, and you grow an audience on any of these channels. And my worry is that they own your audience, that you grow it on Instagram and that's where your audience is and they've helped you grow it. But the moment you want to drag them somewhere else, it's hard to do that. And I think that's the same for a lot of these channels, really. But for me, that's what ideally you want to do, is use these channels to reach other people and then make something that is so bloody good that they will come to where your channel is, which could be your website or your blog. And so you've got some ownership to it, so that you can not rely on having to go to Instagram or ultimately paying for things, as they lock stuff down and change, which they do from time to time. So it's trying to help bridge that gap and bring people over. That's always what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to find the most effective way of doing that. Now, I realize we're coming up to the hour, so I'd like to just quickly touch on a few of these here. TikTok, that's reasonably new. I think a lot of people have found good traction on that in terms of they post content and it really brings in a lot of views. I'm just not sure about what engagement you actually get from it and actions outside of TikTok. I think it can get you lots of attention on TikTok, but does it deliver? Does it help you get products and actual sales? Ultimately, I think it depends on your audience and whether it works for you. You know, if you're someone in the public sphere, I think it could be really good to do some fun things on there. But if you're a business, you might be able to break through something. But I think it's got to be exceptional because there's so much exceptional stuff on TikTok. You've got to work really hard. Twitter, I won't label on Twitter. Reddit's an interesting one for a lot of people. I'm hearing a lot, certainly on podcasts, people who want to dive into specific subjects. Reddit is like some mega forum of basically any information, any sort of topic has a community, and then there's maybe a sub community around it. So actually Reddit does tend to have very engaged audiences that anyone can join into, but your conversation is limited to people who are interested, which I think is there's something that needs to be explored with it. I haven't really explored it, but a lot of people get a lot from it and find that there's both bad and good on Reddit because it serves all audiences. But actually, there's a lot of good in the way it moderates itself, that any group that sets up, any sort of topic that's set up moderates itself within that. So they don't leave it to higher moderators. So maybe you get what you expect really when you join a group. LinkedIn, we'll skip that. A lot of people know about LinkedIn. Snapchat, I haven't heard much about Snapchat recently. Do you know how it's doing, Jack?
I think those figures sort of indicate in terms of from a business what that appeal looks like, and I think we may see, and please, especially this is being recorded so we can come back to it. I think Snapchat and all the hype around that of how businesses might be able to use it, TikTok may follow a similar sort of pattern. I think it just dwindles because it is as much as we talk about trying to find a community, your target audience, your existing audience, and find them in one place. There's obviously a variety of different tools of how you communicate, whether that's Facebook or Instagram. Snapchat seems to me a little bit sort of one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, there is a way of communicating, but I think it'll just dwindle, and it will just be somewhere where individuals use it to, whether that's serious content or probably the more humorous, possibly more, let's say, flippant content. They'll use it purely just to share with friends. And it will have a very limited shelf life because people will grow out of it because it will just be limited to a younger audience.
Yeah,
a young audience, not younger.
I found with sometimes a lot of people like, especially younger people, and it's interesting with my 12-year-old now starting to use not social media. He did try and sign up for a Facebook account, didn't allow that. But he's on Discord, so he's using one that's not mentioned on here, which is a social channel. Started off for gamers, but it's both an real-time audio communication and chat. So that's something that a lot of people are using for groups because it works quite well for that. But yeah, it is interesting how people use apps specifically for a group of friends. So like, there's some friends over here, there's some friends on this channel, parents are on Facebook, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So just looking at Pinterest, I really like, and I think it can work quite well for some businesses, and it goes with my ethic of wanting to produce content and put it out there, and then it's findable. It's not like a timeline on a social platform where it's there and just disappears and it's into a pile of lost tweets and posts and so on. Whereas with Pinterest, you can put images out there of your product or your fabrics or whatever it might be, and they're there to find. Google indexes it very well. So again, from an SEO point of view, it's great. It actually can bring in a lot of traffic. Medium is another social channel, probably a bit like what YouTube, but for blogs. So you post on Medium. It was created by the creator of Twitter, one of the creators of Twitter. I can't remember which one of the directors. But so Medium is where you post a blog, and then it has other people on Medium who might write blog posts or who are just reading can then communicate and comment on it. And it's actually got a bit of a social network to it, very similar to YouTube in that sense. But it can be a really good way to get noticed, because if you're on Medium, then it can help surface those topics to people who are just looking for information. Another one I want to mention just at the end is Clubhouse, which is a new social network, which is slightly different. It's a bit more like this platform. You set up I can't remember what they're called, but let's call it a room. So you set up a room, and maybe Jack, maybe we do this on Clubhouse. So we just all set up a room and say, oh, we're going to be talking about social media. And then people, if they're interested, can just join and they can listen. And it's all on the iPhone at the moment. They can just listen. So it's a bit like talk radio in that sense. But if we want to, if maybe someone puts up their hand, they want to say something, we can invite them in. And then they have audio privileges and they can start talking and join the conversation. I haven't used it much, but I have experimented with it for with a guy called Ben Catley Richardson. And he was experimenting with it too. And we went on that actually. It works a bit like this. If you just bring a few people together and have a core topic and just talk around it, it can be a really good way for some people, especially during lockdown. I think that's what it's taken off, of just having something on in the background and just listening to people chat. How it will fare after lockdown, I don't know. It's not particularly convenient. Things aren't recorded. So you have to have it on the iPhone. If you want to listen to something later, you can't. You've got to be there live or it's gone. I think it would be interesting to check it out. I don't know, Jack, you haven't used Clubhouse yet, have you?
No, I know of it, but I haven't used it. And
yeah,
we'll wait and see.
From a business perspective, I feel there's probably more utility to Clubhouse than some of these others, because you can go on there, and if you're a channel that's active, people are going to see that when they join, because they'll join and go, oh yeah, this is what's on now. I'll listen to that, and it goes in line with the way I like to work. Problem is, it's just I want to record it, and that's not something they do. I mean, technically, it's possible to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned that you described it a bit like talk radio, whereas now, let's say, look at some of the, let's say, BBC 5 Live, for example, or Radio 4. That now, yes, there are these live radio shows, as they have been for decades. But then they keep pushing to go that they have a daily podcast, and really the podcast is just we were talking about highlight videos, that there is just 30 minutes of that 3-hour show, or there is a weekly podcast.
So there we go. Yeah, that's a good way of using it.
Could it move towards that? I think from what you're saying there and how you describe it, could it be exactly like this? This can be found by people when it's recorded or even live, but the only people that drop in are either people that you know or know of. So does that come back to, again, this theme we've spoken about for the last hour is niche and community. So there is already an established interest, and there's likely they will already, either vice versa, you know of them or they know of you, as opposed to just this broadcast tool.
Yeah, not
used afterwards.
Yeah, not anyone. Thanks for bringing it back around to the beginning. I've got loads of other questions to ask. Maybe we'll need to do another one of these at some point. But maybe just to round it off, just one thing, maybe if to impress upon people, if they're to use social media, which many people do, but if they're reviewing what they use in terms of which platform, how they use it, and so on, any advice on that? I'll go with Jack first, and then come to you, Claire, after.
I was hoping for a bit of time to think about it. I could probably do another 10 minutes. One thing to think about. I think it comes taking the time to sit down and review the platforms that you're using, what you've got from them, where are your different audiences, with then to quickly think about where do you want to be seen and where do you need to be seen, so that either you stop doing what isn't working or you reduce it, or then you actually really hone in on who is your target audience and where is the best place to position yourself. And then we can go on in terms of what you talk about and how that messaging
that's perfect.
Really position yourself in the right place, as opposed to positioning yourself everywhere and hoping for the best.
Yeah, so I like that. Really think about who you're trying to communicate with, and then find the right space where they are. Yeah, great. Claire, any ideas?
Yeah, I would agree. I would pause and reflect on where you are and what you're doing, and really think about how you can be remarkable in your content to get the audience. And that
good old Seth Godin.
With a podcast that's coming out next month that Ben talks about and gives some great tips. So I would.
Hey, look at you! You're good.
For that.
Promoting there. Thank you for that. Let's see what else we've got on here. So I normally ask people to commit to action. If you've heard something that you think is interesting, or it's just listening to us bumble along in the background, you've gone, oh yeah, I need to do this. Write it down, get it done. Tell other people, it helps. Hopefully you find it useful. I mean, there's so many channels out there. Go and have a look at the slide and say, oh, actually Reddit, I could check that out, or Medium. Have a look at them and see if it's going to suit you. And as Jack said, make sure it's going to be right for your. It's going to be a good fit for you and your audience. No, we haven't got time for that. So if anyone is, if you enjoy listening to these, do tell other people. Actually, elements of these, as Claire said, you can join the club for free and get our podcast and newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks. If you want if you think it's worthwhile for other people, do tell them to join this part of the club as well. They have to pay a little bit of money, but I think they get a lot out of it. They just send them over to ratherinventive.com/club and they can find out more about it there. In terms of, why is there a Christmas tree there? That is interesting. I really don't know why there's a Christmas tree on my slide, but the next club session is on the 23rd of April at 1 p.m. It must have stayed on there for Christmas. I've not realized. Anyway, so we're next doing this 23rd of April at 1 p.m. Don't know what the topic is. Going to be a surprise. But I'll let everyone know in Basecamp. Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you, Jack. And I'll catch you on the other side. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Ben. Bye.